Hello, everyone, and thanks very much for attending the giant event for this first panel discussion of the day. As you can see, our objective today is the subject of artificial intelligence, and it's true that today artificial intelligence is shaping up the world of healthcare. For all of us patients of health professionals, digital technology make possible a new way of working, a new way of treating or being treated. We are used to evaluating drugs on the market and medical device, but what about all these new solutions that are emerging? What are the different perspectives of clinical evaluation of artificial intelligence solution? And to answer to this question, I'm delighted to welcome three experts in the field who will be able to shed light on this major issue. We have with us today Frédéric Jean, which is Chief Operating Officer of the Digital Medical Hub, which is a spin-off of APHP, which is the public assistance of the Hospital of Paris. The Digital Medical Hub's objective is to accelerate the maturation of innovative healthcare projects and to support the integration of new in technology into French-speaking healthcare system, both by supporting their development and by setting up multidisciplinary business board with doctors, paramedics, and a lot of experts. The Digital Medical Hub is at the interdisciplinary crossroad of the issue faced by the various players in the ecosystem, such as hospital, research support, structure, industry, and the relevant regulatory authorities. Frédéric Jean is a French manager with a passion for home care, mobility, and a medical device. With a background in marketing and merchandising, and now business leader, he provides strategic and operational advice to international companies, as well as small businesses and startups. And thank you very much, Frédéric, for sharing your expertise today.
Thank you.
We are also fortunate to have with us Aymeric Lebon, which is Managing Director of Strategical, which is a consulting services firm at the crossroad of the pharmaceutical and medical device world, also involved with many diverse clients, such as pharmaceutical companies, startups, and many others. Aymeric is specialized in quality management and oversees different missions on pharmaceutical sites, as well as in the medical device field. He has a particular predilection for the world of startup and innovative technology. And thanks a lot very much, Aymeric. We have with us today also Alexandre Templier, co-founder and president of Quinten, which is a technology consulting and services company in data science and artificial intelligence, specialized in decision support within private and public organizations. Quinten's main sector of activity is healthcare, with clients that are mainly pharmaceutical companies. And Alexandre Templier has been working now over 25 years in the life science industry. He's passionate about information technology and computer-aided decision, and he has dedicated his professional career to improve healthcare product and medical practice through real-life data analysis and artificial intelligence. And thank you very much, Alexandre, also for being with us today. And now I will stop to talk because, of course, we would like to have the expert vision. So, in fact, we are going to start this first panel discussion with you, Alexandre. And with the first question, what are the health data that finally allow the development of those artificial intelligence solutions, and how we can access to this data today?
Thank you, Daphne, and thank you, everyone. I'm glad to be here today with you to share some views about this topic. I think, first of all, we should make difference between simple software solutions and AI solutions. It has been published widely over the last couple of years. A lot of companies claims they are using artificial intelligence, whereas they actually use simple software technologies. So that's the first distinction that should be made. Now, regarding the artificial intelligence, and we will talk about it in a minute, there are also many forms of artificial intelligence, and we perhaps should also focus on some of them. But before that, we also should make a difference between AI-driven solutions that are medical devices, meaning solutions that are intended to influence a medical decision or a surgical gesture, for instance, that fall into the regulation of medical devices, and that will be probably part of the discussions we'll have later in this session. And if we have to focus also on specific artificial intelligence solutions in a medical device environment, so it means based on patient-level data, we should perhaps also focus on the artificial intelligence solutions that are based on machine learning technologies. So I think now we've focused a little bit the discussion. The first thing we should emphasize is that those solutions are essentially meant to learn from past experience through data, historical data, in order to inform future decisions. Now, having said that, obviously you need data to do that, right? So if we talk about real-world data, which is a very trendy world at the moment, and for specific reasons, that it's just to make a difference between clinical trial data, which is commonly used when developing a drug or a device before reaching the market, and then the medical product is used on the market, and then it may be in the different settings that in the clinical trial setting. And that's why real-world data is so important, because when the product is used in the real world, then it may be used for different patients, a wider diversity of patients, and it may generate different outcomes, different benefits. And that's why this real-world data is so important when you develop a drug, a drug or medical device, even if it's not AI-driven, because it helps the industrial company better understand the natural history of the disease, the standard of care, meaning the competition, and the related outcomes. And obviously, it also helps when the product is on the market to evaluate its own performance and benefits for the payers. So back to your question, Daphne, obviously when you develop an AI-driven AI solution, you obviously need real-world data to train the algorithms and to understand how to take the better decisions in the future. So you asked the question, what data can we access? As a company, Quinten Health has massively and intensively used over the last 4 years American data, because there was between 2008 and 2015 massive investments in the US, billions of dollars, to help the hospitals equip themselves with electronic health records, which made these data widely available in the US. In addition to that, and Frédéric will probably underline this, the regulation in terms of data privacy and data protection in the US is less constraining than the GDPR. And I think that's good news that we have this GDPR in Europe in terms of competition, but also in terms of data privacy. And it just means that it takes some more time for European and French organizations to have this data interoperable and widely available as it currently is in the US. Now, and again, Frédéric will probably develop this point. In order to finalize my answer to your question, and please tell me if I'm too long, because I know time is the essence here. Very importantly, not only the industrial company needs patient-level data and technologies to extract intelligence, but also the hospitals, obviously, that are generating this data and which are not able to leverage this data to improve their decisions on a daily basis. And that's where the AI-driven decision support solutions will bring a lot of value. And last but not least, the regulatory agencies that are intended to monitor the safety of the medical products, including those algorithms, but also the payers, which negotiates the prices with the industrial companies, obviously need some more objectivity in their daily work. And that's why real-world data is so important for all of them. And let's not forget the patient. Of course, there are a lot of apps that will be available within the Health Data Hub and the portfolio of applications that will be available for healthcare professionals, and we should not forget that. So I hope I gave you complete answers, and please feel free to ask any questions if I didn't.
Thanks a lot, Alexandre, for bringing this vision. And thanks a lot for bringing the regulatory aspect also. I think we will come back at the end of this panel discussion. Maybe, Emeric, do you want to react to this question also?
Yes, thank you very much. So if I complete what I've been told to you, yes, exactly. If the product is involved in any clinical decision or any clinical therapeutic alternative choice for any patient, you will follow the medical device regulation. And since this new regulation introduce a very specific new aspect is that any product needs a clinical evaluation, and on this basis, all the softwares and specifically of the artificial intelligence softwares will need this kind of, I would say, clinical data. This clinical data came from legacy products, such as it has been told. So it's from history, and you can told the history of your product and what has been done before. But what it is very difficult now is claiming the equivalent to product already on the market will be more and more difficult. So this will lead you and lead legal manufacturer of this type of product to set up clinical investigation. And the challenge will be they will have to try to identify what the payers will want and what the regulators will want, and try to make just one clinical investigation at the same time to create some kind of synergy about the cost and the time saving. So this is the main point. It's the regulations that will lead us and will lead everyone involved in the AI solution to set up clinical investigation. At the same time, we will discuss at the very last time, but the regulation is moving about artificial intelligence, and almost all the solutions using AI in the health field will have to set up this kind of clinical information or clinical investigation to raise some data. I will discuss it later, but this is something very new, but necessary.
Thanks a lot, Henrik, for this precision. And maybe, Frederic, do you want to react also? You have also the hospital perspective on that.
You're in mute, Frederic.
Frederic, you are on mute.
It's okay right now. Sorry for that. It's a joke. Yeah, I can talk about the perspective of the hospital and the DMH perspective.
You're on mute again.
It's really strange. It's okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So we have at our disposal three main levels of research and access to the data. The first one is the global and aggregated scale, and more or less the standardized access, like GaiaX in Europe, the Health Data Hub, and the hospital health data warehouses. It's the institutional scale, more dedicated to research. So the current policy on access to data from health data warehouses, including the APHP, you know, it's a 39 hospital in France. It's very tightly framed. The purpose project must contain a strong scientific research aspect with close collaboration with a scientific and clinical team from APHP. The DMH can create this project task force with working with startups to find the right partners and helping to draft the project. This is the only way to gain access to these main data hubs. This type of partnership and association can lead to public-private research collaborations. So one thing you have to know is that at the DMH, we do not engage in co-ownership of the IP resulting from this R&D project. The industrial partner retains full ownership of the intellectual property. On the other hand, royalties or upfront do exist and are negotiated when the project is set up. There's a middle scale for the data access. It's the medical service or hospital data. It's more dedicated to business and industrial partnership. much less regulated. The scale gives access to medical service and or medical team data or information system export. It's the same axis of collaboration as I said before, the access to these sets being the responsibility of the caregivers and physicians. The implementation is generally much more faster than institutional scale. I talked before. One problem, these two scales are rarely satisfactory in terms of quality of the data provided. Cleaning is very time consuming, and the recovered set generally do not have the qualities expected by the project team. So it's a big challenge. Because the main reason our current information systems are data destructors. The lack of ergonomics and usability force users to fill in the information in textual format and in our forms. To give you an idea, the rate of unstructured data was 80% in 2010, and today it's around 87%, more than 80%. Second difficulty, the access time, between 12 and 18 months on average, excluding the contracting time. Element to each project must be managed on case-by-case basis. So we at the digital medical tend to favor a third scale, the lower scale, prospective data on clinical studies. So we create custom protocols tailored to the project using prospective formats to retrieve and build up the data set specially for the development project. We can also add IoT's data, all the necessary clinical data with a medical labeling contextualization at the cutting edge of the most demanding projects. So the quality, at the end, the quality of the set is therefore guaranteed, and the time to obtain them is approximately the same than before. Moreover, your data set, the data set of the startup is unique, and the project is in proprietary. No competitor will have the possibility to create the same artificial intelligence tool. It's that for the way we can scale the data access in the hospital. 3 main scales.
Thanks a lot, Frederic, for all this information and for bringing the perspective of hospital also. And finally, I have the question that how can we evaluate this solution, and what are maybe the potential risks that you can observe? Maybe, Emeric, I will start with you this time.
Yeah, but it is very difficult when we try to evaluate this kind of solution is, and it is mainly the job of my co-speaker today, is to identify the good clinical endpoints, because in fact we are at the moment that it is joining two things: the history and the historical endpoints, and the way to proceed the clinical investigation and generate data and demonstrate the performance and effectiveness of your product. And at the same time, now we will have to identify a new way to do that, new way to demonstrate the benefits for the society, and at the same time demonstrate that we can have new risks such as cybersecurity. For example, yes, if you are using, if there is some intrusion in your software and you can manage an important medical device or any important solution at the place of the customers, is something that be very critical. So we generate new risk, and at the same time we generate new opportunities. What will be difficult also is that the regulation has not been done for AI evaluation. We are taking pictures when we are doing some evaluation of this product, pictures at the moment, and AI by definition is something moving really fast. And what it is difficult is to follow this change as fast as it is with a regulatory point of view and to follow this change. And at the moment, I think no notified body, no real health authority, know really how to manage this very fast evolution and creating new risk is that you want to go really quickly on the market, but at the same time, the market is not ready to let you know how to manage it.
Thanks a lot, Emric. And maybe, Alexandre, do you have a vision on that also? Because you are working for so many years on the artificial intelligence solution. I think we lose maybe Alexandre.
I'm sorry, I was in.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
So actually, I think again to provide a concise and precise answer to your question, start to talk about which evaluation we are talking about. If we talk about the regulatory evaluation, you need to bring an AI solution, which would be a medical device, on the market, which means to get an approval, regulatory approval, and then a reimbursement. In order to get this, you need a proper evaluation, and you actually submit it to constraints and obligations that are at the level of the pharmaceutical standards, right? So it means that you need to demonstrate the efficacy and safety of your device with regard to your claims, what you want to achieve, right? So you have to demonstrate that through a series of clinical studies that may be long and expensive. And I think it's important to highlight that the first solution that is currently available and reimbursed in France was evaluated through several years of clinical studies before reaching the market and being reimbursed. And I think that any companies starting to develop a medical device should have this in mind, because they will have to go through this, especially if they are in a class that needs that, typically 2A, 2B, 3, etc. So that's the first thing. So being able to demonstrate the efficacy that is claimed, the safety that is claimed, so demonstrate the outcomes, and the medical and financial benefits for the payers if you want to get a reimbursement. So that's one answer. The second answer is once you are in the market, then you may have to go through an annual evaluation. That's the case now for medical devices. And there you can do retrospective evaluation if you organize yourself correctly with some hospitals and basically a data setting that helps you to pull the relevant real-world data in order to see on the patients where your device was used, the type of differences that you can observe in terms of outcomes, medical and economic benefits. So again, no major differences and no differences between actual non-AI driven devices and AI devices. Now, having said that, one has probably still in mind the examples of biases and flaws of algorithms that were expected, for instance, to predict the flu outreach, the one that was very famous by Google. That was actually demonstrated to be flawed just because it was relying on the search on Google. And basically, a lot of people search for this specific algorithm that completely changed the data on which the algorithm was based to make predictions, right? So it means that there are biases like that, as Emric underlined. Those artificial intelligence algorithms can drift in their performance because the data they were developed on is actually not the same once they are used, right? So there are biases like that. You can divide between technical biases that may hinder the performance of your algorithms, but also ethical biases when you end up breaking the equality and the symmetry between different classes of population, which sometimes you don't want to do, right? But that's where things get complicated because the algorithms are essentially made to identify the heterogeneity differences and take decisions based on those heterogeneities and the likeliness of reaching the performance that is expected. So in a nutshell, I would say that what is very important when you develop an algorithm for medical purposes is to, first of all, put enough efforts and energy and resources, making sure that you anticipate any drifts of your algorithm. Right? That's one. Making sure that you deliver the value you're expected to deliver and you want to be paid for. And last but not least, make sure your algorithm will have a chance to be understood by lay people. And that's probably the hardest piece of the challenge, because right now, we talked about machine learning at the beginning of the discussion. Some subfields of machine learning are more difficult to understand than others. And reversely, some different machine learning technologies are interpretable by design, right? So when it comes to influencing a medical decision, you probably ought to make sure that the doctor will understand where the recommendations come from, right? So I will, it's not a commercial forum here, but I would like to emphasize the fact that in the 80s, back in the 80s, there were the expert systems, right? That was, inference engines that were working with expert rules, human knowledge that was injected in the system in the form of rules. If you have this characteristic and this characteristic, then you have this outcome. And the set of rules was actually used by the inference engine, the expert system, to guide decisions based on a priori injected human knowledge. Obviously, the rules are understandable by humans because they are generated by humans, right? There is a global trend now, which is to use connectionist types of artificial intelligence, neural networks, deep learning, that are very good at predicting, classifying when they have a big number of examples. But the backside of that is that they are not interpretable. It's very difficult to interpret why they made such a prediction or a recommendation. There are some research and tools that help to make them more interpretable, but they are not interpretable by design. There are other types of machine learning solutions that are intended to generate expert rules based on data. And these expert rules can be injected in the system in order to inform the decisions from doctors. And I personally believe that this technology has a bright future, because that's a way, again, to inform medical decisions, to propose to the doctor some insights on what happened in the past in terms of good practices, bad practices, and avoid them to reproduce past errors and allow them to leverage past successes, right? And I'm personally convinced that those technologies will have, again, a bright future in decision support in the medical field, because that's the way to preserve the human expertise and actually to expand it for the sake of the patients and the community.
Thank you very much, Alexandre. It was a very interesting view and very clear. Maybe, Frédéric, do you want to react also to this point?
Yeah. I can dig into the risk and bias around the evaluation of AI solution. First and foremost, clinical evaluation of these solutions are quite difficult to conduct in the context of an evolving regulation framework. Evaluating the reliability, the clinical interest, and the robustness of an artificial intelligence makes sense. It's true, but the evaluation approach of this type of tool is not to investigate its characteristic in isolation. Instead, we consider evaluating the tool in regards to the system process as a whole. Not doing this is already a first study bias. Not evaluating the tool in its system, in its care pathway, is for us the first analysis bias. It is an inclusion bias and a study design bias. Our first step is therefore to describe the system, the clinical workflow, the patient pathway in which the technology brick will be inserted. This is the only way to evaluate and validate the clinical service provided by the solution. The second step at the DMH is to guarantee the inclusion of the digital solution in our organizations, APHP and beyond, and in the user pathway within our various information systems. These aspects are considered from the very first stage of the product development. Some elements such as concept, terminology, management system of AI, ethical and societal concern, assessment of robustness, etc., need to be seen by an interdisciplinary team. And this is at the beginning of the AI project in order to minimize the risks and maximize the return on investment for future users and the hospital. For this, we must generalize and democratize the use of intermediary roles. In order to show you my concern, let's take an analogy with the explanation of the concept of API for application programming interface. Imagine you are in a French restaurant. It's not the case today, but it will be perhaps in a few days, and order your dish. Okay, the waiter takes the order and asks the chef to prepare your dish. The waiter comes back with your dish. Somewhere, the waiter is the person who allowed you to free yourself from what ingredient you need, how many grams of what ingredient, what species, etc. Indeed, the waiter simplifies for you the complexity of the kitchen to make food. The API analogy is in reality a person who allows to establish the communication between two complex elements and who makes them simpler in order to align all stakeholders. In fact, in field of artificial intelligence in health, it's necessary to create new roles that have enough empathy to know how to communicate with health professionals and simplify the complexity of the AI jargon. This new role positions in our company all good communication between business and users and tech teams. And for the moment, these profiles are too rare in the market. At DMH, we try to democratizing this approach because we believe that is the key to efficiency deploy products into the hospital.
Thanks a lot, Frederic. And maybe finally, with all this, how are the regulation evolving today in the face of this? Maybe Emeric, if you want to react on this question.
Yeah, thank you. Just to complete what I've been told, and then to open to the regulatory point of view. What it is very difficult to know is at the moment when we are talking about artificial intelligence, we have two phases. We have first phase is learning. Learning helps the algorithm to be fixed and to be design freeze, if I would say. And during this first phase, we are collecting data. This data can be collected retrospectively, or they can be collected prospectively. And this will really have an important point here, because if they are collected retrospectively, here the main regulatory field is very well defined in every state member of the European community. But if we are talking about help the algorithm to learn based on data collected directly on patients, this is very difficult, because normally the definition of clinical investigation is to verify the effectiveness and the safety of the product. Here, it is to make your product learn. So the status here, on a regulatory point of view, may be quite difficult to identify. And I think this is a point that still has to be investigated deeper. This is one point. The second point will be the validation of your product, and we discuss it a lot at the moment, and this is very well managed by the regulation presently. So as an opening, something interesting would be, okay, what would be the regulatory field in the coming years? And in fact, at the moment, there is no specific guidance about AI for the medical field. This is quite difficult because they are products very specific, and they may be very different from softwares, traditional softwares. So this is something I think that will evaluate in the coming years, and I think we will have new guidelines on how to define and identify the performance and to manage the safety. At the same time, why I am saying that is because maybe you know that 2 weeks ago, the Commission published a draft on a new regulation of the Council and Parliament to regulate the artificial intelligence in general. So since the artificial intelligence may have an impact on the life of any people, any citizen of the European Commission, on the European territory, sorry, we may have to reach a kind of CE marking for this kind of artificial intelligence. And here we are collegating both regulation on medical device field and this new regulation. And we are going to do the link that anyway, you may be positioned on wellness. You may be positioned just outside the medical field at the moment because you are just talking about, I would say, how to manage patients in an hospital, for example. Or you can be in, you can come under the regulation of the medical device. Every AI solution will come into a regulation, and you will have to demonstrate your effectiveness. You will have to demonstrate your safety, and more than that, this is a very new important aspect you will have to keep in mind. You will have to give proof of transparency on how the AI is functioning, based on what data and for what purpose. And this is very important because in the medical device field, this is something we used to do because we know why we are doing a software and an AI solution, but in any other customer fields, maybe this is not very clear at the moment.
Thanks a lot, Emric. And maybe before ending, Frederic, do you want to add also your point of view on the regulatory aspect?
Yeah, I can share our thought on that subject. In our opinion, it's crucial to support players in their access to the market. A flexible approach does not hinder innovation and the creation of value-added solution for patients. On medical devices and medical AI, American and European regulation oppose themselves one more time on competition, copyright, healthcare, and AI now. So on one end, we have the American system in parallel to the health technology entrepreneur. The Federal Drug and Administration is also innovating in programs of regulation and control of medical software today. With the creation in 2019, one of the innovative devices like the PRESET program, the FDA intends to support players in their access to the market, to develop a flexible approach that doesn't hinder innovation and the creation of high-value added solution for the patient care. It is a co-designed regulatory model shared with company and stakeholders through principle of efficiency, culture of quality, and organizational excellence. So the company that have reached pre-certification have are expected to continue to provide the same safety and effectiveness standards that the agency expects for the product that they have followed the traditional path to the market, such as program focus on confidence, excellence, and integrated standards. On the other hand, we have the European approach continuing to regulate all the digital activities since 1995. European institutions established laws, GPD, Open Data Directive, Future Data Governance Act, and launched programs like H2020, EU Strategy for Data, to debate on the best way to support innovation in Europe. Among key actors, the European Commission intends to establish borders in player access to the market to develop a balanced approach that promotes the uptake of AI and that addresses the risks associated with certain use of such technology. It is a normative model, okay? Decided by politics and applied to company and stakeholders. Through principles of responsibility, compliance ex ante, and external control ex post. The company are not certified, but their activities are evaluated on the well-defined and proportionate risk-based approach. Such a regulation focuses on legal certainty, fundamental rights, and monetary requirements. So, in conclusion, on our side, in our opinion, Europe must take inspiration from the American PRECEDE program. The European institutions should not cancel their regulation on their approach. Companies, software developers, digital health technology developers, public authorities, and people need legal certainty. All major players need to have the same rules and the same framework regardless of the technology they develop. All European societies share the same human rights and values. However, the future European Board for AI should be allowed to develop its own program inspired by the American precedent. If its policy is too severe, reaching for conformity, Europe will never take the lead. If its policy is more permissive, reaching for compliance, we think we still have a chance.
So before closing, we finish maybe on one of the good points. We still have a chance, Frederic.
Yeah, for sure.
And maybe before closing the session, I know, Alexandre, if you want to have a point, or if for you there is an important point to also bring to the table.
Thank you, Daphne. No, I think everything was pretty much covered. Maybe there is time for question. Is there any chance to have question from the attendants?
Yeah, we can have it. For the moment, I think we don't have question.
Okay.
And for people who is listening, you can ask your question on the right side, I think. So the question parts. But maybe if I can ask a question, and maybe if you have the answer, what about the liabilities of this clinical evaluation of this artificial intelligence solution?
So here I can perhaps bring a first answer. The regulation and the legal status of those medical devices, AI-powered medical devices, is covered by the that's going to be difficult to translate in English, but responsabilité du fait des choses. So it means basically when you have for instance a car and you let it on the parking lot, and you are not in the car but you actually did not put your brake, you know. If the car is moving and actually make an incident with another car or a human being, then you are responsible even though you were not driving your car, right? So you're responsible for the damages generated by something that belongs to you, right? So the medical devices in general, including the AI-powered medical devices, are submitted to this juridic principle. So it means that when you own a product, you bought it, right? If it's used within the conditions of use that was defined by the industrial company who developed it, then you are responsible for the misuse of this device, right? Now, if it's used correctly with regard to the conditions of use, and it generates a damage, then that's the designer and developer and the company which basically sold and developed and sold the device to the user that is responsible. So I think that's something easy to understand that should be kept in mind. And at the end of the day, it means for a medical decision that the doctor is responsible for the decision that is taken without using properly an AI-driven medical device. But if it does what the medical device suggested and it generates damages, then that's the company that has developed and marketed the device that is responsible.
Yeah, it's really interesting to have it in mind, even if it seems easy sometimes. I don't know, Emric, if you want to add a point also on these liabilities.
Yeah, well, in global point of view, just to complete, and this is exactly right what I've been saying. It's more and more you will have to demonstrate the usability of your product, and by validating this usability of your product, so the way the user will use your product and the patient will use your product. If it's different, you will have to take in mind what can be done incorrectly. And this is quite difficult because you will have to take into account the difference of knowledge, the difference of education between a physician and I would say uneducated people as a patient. And this could be quite difficult because the liability will be, I think, will be here. Maybe you will have to try to have a global overview of who will use your product and try to anticipate any adverse situation and any usability problem. So situation where your product will be used differently from the information you are giving in the instruction for use, for example. And you will have to anticipate, because it's not because you are giving your product and you anticipate, I would say, cybersecurity, for example, if you do not understand that the people maybe are not trained on how to manage their smartphone and the cybersecurity on the smartphone. So you open some breach, and this breach will lead to some bigger breach on cybersecurity, for example. So the liability will be something very difficult. I think it will always come back to the legal manufacturer, as it has been told. But at the same time, the regulation is also done to say, I try to anticipate everything as much as possible. And in the European perspective, this may get lower the impact on the company of its liability if there is some adverse event using your product, for example.
Thank you very much, Emric, and thank you very much to all three of you. And you have to know we are on time, so it's a really big, it's really nice. And thank you to all the participants also for listening us today. And I will let the scene to the second panel discussion, which is an EA solution for the pharma industry. And thank you again, Frederic, Alexandre, and Emric.
Thank you
See you soon.
For your invite. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hello. And though we're just waiting a few minutes to make sure everyone is able to join.